It's Tuesday, February 7th. Welcome back, everybody. John Aravosis here with the Aravosis Report. Thank you for joining me again. This is my nightly show, Monday to Friday, 6 p.m. Eastern, where we talk about the latest news from Ukraine. Let me get my TikTok rolling here on my iPad. And as always, we'll wait a couple minutes for folks to arrive. I'll adjust my lighting. Okay, that's a little too strong. um, and thank you, Carlos, for the gift there. We'll wait a minute for the troops to arrive. I'm going to still play with my lighting a little. Well, maybe that works. Maybe that works. We'll see. Anyway, hey everybody, give a quick shout out where you're calling in from, visiting, where first caller calling in from, visiting from wherever. And we'll wait a minute for the folks to arrive and then we'll get rolling. So excellent. Excellent. Vancouver. TikTok class was I shouldn't knock the TikTok class on TikTok. I'm gonna be careful with that. Maybe we'll talk about it on the Discord. Next topic. Next topic. Who's that on LinkedIn? Maybe. Oh yeah, or LinkedIn, I think. Yeah. Hey, Rodney. Oh boy. Exactly, on Twitch. Yes, I'm safe on Twitch, except that I'm beaming live to TikTok too. So I'm being a good boy tonight. Anyway, hey everybody, check in. Just give a quick shout out. Tell folks where you are coming from, because I always think it's kind of a nice way to start the show while we wait for critical mass. I think we're a critical mass. We can start. All right, welcome everybody. I am John Aravosis here. Welcome TikTok and the rest of you over here on my laptop for YouTube, Twitch, etc. This is the Aravosis Report, my nightly show, Monday to Friday, 6 p.m. Eastern, where we talk about the latest news from Ukraine. For about the first half of the show, I will go through the news, and the second half of the show, I will take your guys' questions and comments. At any time, you can certainly post questions. Thank you, Inspired Woman. You can post questions on TikTok via the Q&A link that is in my profile. And for the rest of you, obviously use the comment box at the bottom of your screen. I do appreciate your gifts, whether it's on TikTok or the Super Chat, Super Stickers on YouTube, because I do this for free. It is full-time, and nobody else is paying me. So I rely on your guys' gifts to keep going. So I very much appreciate it. Thank you very much. So let's get rolling, guys. Tonight is the State of the Union address here in America. Now, thank you, Jack, for the hearts. It's kind of a silly evening. It's a really boring tradition. What do? In a nutshell, thank you for the gift there, Inspired Woman. In a nutshell, the State of the Union is meant to be a report to Congress on how things are going in the country. What it actually is about an hour-long speech that is very long. I mean, it's a very long speech where the president talks about what has been achieved over the last year or years, if he's several years into the presidency, and what he hopes to achieve in the next year, what he wants to focus on, legislation he wants Congress to send, etc. It's kind of boring. I mean, I'm sorry. I'm a political guy. I've watched too many of these things over the years. They're just really boring. So anyway, watch at your own peril. Somebody else is using the word peril. I say peril for those watching the State of the Union. But nonetheless, Biden is expected tonight to make another pitch for Ukraine, not surprisingly. Thank you, Marie. I have said from the beginning, I don't think the president has been doing a good enough job kind of explaining to the American people why we're there, why our help is needed, and frankly, what we've accomplished so far. It's amazing what we've accomplished. And of course, it's not just us, it's our European allies, and it's the Ukrainians themselves. But the point is, all of us together, we know this. I mean, I'm not bruising any egos here by saying all of us together have helped Ukraine survive another year. Thank you, Al, for the rose. And that's really important. And I think it's important for the president to make that clear, but also to tell Americans why we're there. I think it's important we're there. I think we should be there. And I think we're frankly avoiding a war with Russia in the future by helping Ukraine today. An empowered Russia that wins Ukraine, that takes over Ukraine, is going to be much worse. Basically, we're back to the Soviet Union again. And any of you who are too young to sort of have experienced it, it was really bad. The Soviet Union was pretty much run by the Russians. It was like 15 countries, but it was run by the Russians. They kind of ate up all of their neighbors. And it was a brutal dictatorship. I visited once when it was the Soviet Union in 1984. really scary time there. I mean, it's a scary dictatorship. And then once in 1993, once the Soviet Union had gone, um, anyway, I think Putin's trying to bring us back there again. The question is whether Putin is going to try to eat up all of his neighbors like they did during the Soviet times, but clearly he's brought it back to a dictatorship again. And I just think Biden needs to do a better job explaining that to folks. In any case, so State of the Union. I was looking at this in the New York Times today. To date, the United States has provided Kyiv, the Ukrainian government, with 29.3 billion in cash and equipment from Pentagon's stockpiles. Now, what's important about that is you will see opponents of Ukraine in America who tend to be, well, they're either some of the MAGA crowd, not all the MAGA crowd. We've talked about this before. Republicans overall are still very supportive, but some of the MAGA crowd are not great because Trump himself is not great on this. But you will see either the MAGA crowd or the uber far left, I mean, the left-wing extremists, talk about, we've spent $100 billion on Ukraine. Thank you, CESPA or OESPA for the goggles. Yes and no, not really. In terms of money for Ukraine directly, as I said, 29.3 billion in cash and in equipment. The rest of it has gone for things such as rebuilding America's defenses. Because we've given Ukraine a lot of our weapons, we have to build those weapons again for ourselves, ammunition, whatever. So that's part of it. Part of it has been supporting our European allies, helping weapons for them, frankly, for stationing American troops in Europe. We've increased the number of American troops in Europe by several thousand, I think by 20,000, I don't know the exact number. And that takes money and it takes effort, and you've got to keep kind of replacing them with new troops every few months because the old troops get tired and blah, blah, blah. Anyway, so a lot of the money is gone for other supporting things as well that we would have had to be doing anyway, even if we didn't help Ukraine, by the way. All the rest of that would still be actually, this is a really good argument that I don't see people making on the force of those on the side of apple pie and the American way. If we didn't help Ukraine and Russia took over Ukraine, we would have to have such a new investment in Europe militarily. It's not even funny. If Russia took over Ukraine and Russia was therefore, get out the handy dandy map, okay? Let's say within 3 to 10 days, Russia just obliterated Ukraine, okay? And now a year later, Ukraine has become part of Russia. I mean, literally, that was Russia's plan. They were going to wipe out the country entirely, okay? You've now got Russia on the border here with Poland, with Romania, with Hungary, Slovakia. Who am I missing, folks? Who am I missing? Hungary, Slovakia, Romania, Poland. There's one more I think I'm missing here. Help me. I may be missing one. But you've got all of that there. We would be helping those countries. Moldova. Thank you. Moldova too. Yep, Moldova. We would have been having to put forward American troops in those countries, okay, for starters. We would have to provide lots of weapons for those countries. You better believe the Poles and the other NATO countries there would be telling us, oh my God, right? The amount of troops, the American troops, I mean, we'd be moving a lot more than 20,000, 20,000 American troops to Europe if that happened. I mean, this would be a whole new Cold War. Our defense budget, by the way, too, would it's already almost $800 billion, I think, dollars. Our defense budget would go up too. Anyways, I just think it's something to keep in mind that had we not gotten involved and helped Ukraine, this would have, it's not as though, everything would have gone away and we would have had peace. We would have for sure had a new Cold War. In any case, one thing I thought was interesting, I was just going to tell you really quick. So with Ukraine on the money and the help it's getting, the New York Times was saying this, and it's interesting because we were talking about this a couple of weeks ago about, how is you, for example, some of the weapons, the Germans, I think, were going to sell some of the weapons to the Ukrainians. And we were all asking, like, how exactly are they doing that? Because where does Ukraine get the money from? The Ukraine has asked the U.S. for some types of weapons the U.S. does not have. And so some of the aid packages that we've given them have included cash that the Ukrainian government can use to purchase goods directly from manufacturers from the U.S., but also other countries. So that's where some of the money is coming from. We're intentionally giving them money that they can use to get some of the weapons they need. All right, next topic. The British Ministry of Defense has a daily Twitter update that's very interesting. It's their intelligence division that does sort of a take on what's going on in Ukraine. And their most recent that they have basically came to the conclusion that Russia will not be making any significant gains in Ukraine in the coming weeks. Now, this is important because there's been concern, certainly from the Ukrainians themselves, as to what Russia is planning on doing. There's a lot of concern, of course, about a spring offensive, meaning the Russians planning for some big battle in the spring, possibly as early as the end of March, April, something like that. In the last few weeks, we've been worrying as well about Russia having some kind of big offensive just in the next few weeks. Now, it might be a smaller offensive, but particularly, well, it's actually not clear which offensive is going to be which, but it looks like, at least from what we're hearing, now, mind you, this could all be a bluff. The Russians, the Ukrainians are good at bluffing. The Russians are also very good at bluffing. But the concern is for the anniversary of the invasion, which is February 24th, is when the Russians invaded. Today's February 17th. So that's 17 days away, I think. Yeah, 17 days away. So about a little over 2 weeks. The for the invasion anniversary, we are worried the Russians may try to have some kind of big counterattack take place. What the British Ministry of Defense is saying is that even if they do, they don't think it's going to have a very big impact. Listen to this. Russian forces, first of all, they're saying that Russia's goal will almost certainly be with this, whether it's an invasion in a few weeks or a new invasion in a couple months, will be to finish taking all of Donetsk, which is the province here. So basically, you've got the two provinces in the east that are collectively referred to as the Donbass, but they are Luhansk province, basically a state in Ukraine, Luhansk and Donetsk. Luhansk, Russia controls pretty much all of it, more or less, 98%, whatever. Donetsk, Russia controls about 50%. Putin wants all of this. I would say there's lots of parts that matter to Ukraine. Crimea, hugely important. And of the newer stuff he's gone after, the East is particularly important to Putin. So the thinking is from the British Ministry of Defense is that this is where Putin is going to make his big push, at least initially, to try to get all of the rest of the Donbass that he doesn't yet control. Now, what the British Ministry of Defense is saying, Russian forces have only managed to gain several hundred meters, which is several hundred yards, of territory per week. This is almost certainly because Russia now lacks the munitions, meaning ammunition, things like that. Thank you, Expressed, for the heart there. The munitions and the maneuver units required for successful offensives. Senior commanders likely make plans. This is an interesting observation. Listen to this from the Brits. Senior Russian commanders likely make plans requiring undermanned, inexperienced units to achieve unrealistic objectives due to political and professional pressure. Now, that's great. That's pretty much what we were expecting from the beginning of the war, which is that Putin put a ton of political pressure on the military, and the military basically put the pressure on the troops. And even though the troops were not enough troops and ill-prepared, not well-trained, not a lot of good equipment, they put pressure on these guys. Thank you, Inspired Woman, for that. They put pressure on these guys to do stuff that they could never accomplish, basically. So what they're saying is the troops are still undermanned and not well-trained, which is great. Here. Senior commanders likely make plans. I said Russian leaders will likely continue to demand sweeping advances. It remains unlikely that Russia can build up the forces needed to substantially affect the outcome of the war within the coming weeks. So that's great. Thank you, Big, for the heart. I appreciate that. So that's good news. The prison fighters. This is an interesting story. A lot of the news that I grab, I try to grab stuff that I think is indicative, or either just the big story of the day that we should talk about, or little bits of data that I think are indicative of what's going on. Now, listen to this. I thought this was very interesting. I had mentioned yesterday or the day before, I think it was 2 days ago, not 2 days ago, it would have been either Friday or yesterday, that the number of prisoners being recruited was down. Thank you, Crusher, for that. Now, you might recall that the Wagner group, the mercenary group, the Russian soldiers for hire, has been going to prisons for the last several months and recruiting people and prisoners. And what they've been telling them is, if you fight for 6 months or more, obviously Putin gave them permission to do this. If you fight for 6 months or more for Russia, we will expunge your prison record and you'll be free. Right? Well, you won't be free because they're probably not going to let you out of the military. But we'll expunge your record. If you live, you won't have to go back to prison. Now, what Wagner's been doing, which is kind of a scummy thing to do, oh, there you're back. Okay, the YouTube crowd is back now. I was just telling them we had a troll on TikTok that said that's not true, bro. They're clearly given a list, the Russian trolls, of expressions to use to try to sound American, but they just don't sound real when they use it. And like this right here, like that's not true, bro. It's just like, I'm sorry, it cracks me up. I mean, I will give them credit though, and in a way I appreciate it, because the trolls come here because clearly the show's having some impact, but it just, that's not true, bro. Anyway, Russia's losing, dude. All right, any case, we were talking about Bakhmut in the east before our friends at YouTube fitzed away, and the big battle going on out here. And the lead in the battle in Bakhmut for several months now has been the Wagner group. They've been taking the lead for the Russians. Well, what they've been doing is they have been throwing prisoners. I was just saying before you guys disappeared on me over at YouTube that the Russians have recruited a lot of prisoners to fight with the Wagner mercenary group, and they promised them that they're going to let them go if they fight and live, which is unlikely that they'll live. Well, the Wagner group has been sending these prisoners as literal cannon fodder up against the Ukrainians and just throwing them at them. No support. I mean, no tanks, no vehicles, nothing. Just throwing these guys like charging on the ground, World War I style, going at the Ukrainians. The Ukrainians have been mowing them down. Now, it's apparently, from the reports we're getting, the Russians are throwing so many of these troops at the Ukrainians that it actually is having some impact. I mean, it's kind of crazy, but apparently, you can overwhelm with numbers, even if the numbers are poorly trained people that are getting killed. The overwhelming force of these guys coming at you can make a difference and start to gain more ground. Well, that takes us back to what we were talking about. So I was mentioning a couple days ago that there was data. Some researchers were looking at Russian prison data and all this kind of stuff, and it looked like they were recruiting fewer prisoners. The Russians were, for this battle in Ukraine. And the thinking initially was that they sort of got what they wanted, right? Out of the prisoners, which was basically to kill them. I mean, just send them to die. It was horrible what they were doing to these guys. But now it looks like part of the problem might be the prisoners themselves. Listen to this. This was from today's New York Times. This is what I was saying, where I love this kind of data, where there's like a little data point, but it allows you to sort of extrapolate, possibly learning. I had actually done some internship in graduate school for Zbigniew Brzezinski, who was really cool, man, Polish American, was Jimmy Carter's national security advisor. Brilliant man. I mean, I wish he was around today. Brilliant man. His son is our current ambassador to Poland. And anyway, Brzezinski, but one of the things I was doing for Brzezinski, actually the thing, was going through all of these research reports, these little data things on the Soviet economy, and pulling out just little bits of data, little itty bitty bits of data on the Soviet economy, and trying to pull them all together to get a better image of what was going on. Because particularly with the Soviet Union, even Russia today, you don't really know what's going on. They would kind of try to hide the information from you. In any case, so back to the story. Prison. So per the New York Times, the Russian opposition publication Media Zona, which is a good publication, has said that fewer Russian prisoners are willing to sign up for combat because of reports of high casualties among the penal colony recruits. In other words, the Wagner strategy, and this is Putin's strategy as well, of sending all these prisoners in Bakhmut to just run at the Ukrainians World War I style, got all the prisoners killed. And finally, the prisoners kind of wised up and went, excuse me, you're nuts. Like, I'm going to reach a deal with you to get my prison record expunged, to get a pardon in essence. But, with the proviso that if I live, I'm pardoned, except then you're going to guarantee I get killed? No way. So kind of an interesting point there, that it's affecting some of the Russian war power, the manpower issues as well, which is fascinating. Now, quick thing to tell you, as you guys may know, we have a Discord set up as well, and our Discord community. Thank you, Aggie, for that for the seashore. Our Discord community has a lot of cool things going on, including some auctions. And our auctions have been actually really cool. We've been achieving a lot with them lately. Basically, the auctions, we've been getting cool stuff from Ukraine. Thank you, Darlene. Our Discord is actually, I'll tell you, discord.aravosis.com. You can find the link via aravosis.com, which is on my screen for you all. And for you guys, you can find the links in my profile on TikTok. Just click the main link and you'll find my Discord and everything else. But what we've been doing is we're auctioning off cool things we're getting from Ukraine. Pretty soon, finally, it was just shipped today, finally. I bought several of the sweatshirts that Zelensky, well, let me rephrase this. The sweatshirts Zelensky has bought as well. Not the sweatshirts Zelensky's been wearing, because that would either be cool or gross, depending on your perspective. But we found the company that is making these sweatshirts, the sweatshirts Zelensky's wearing that have the cool little trident. Thank you, Sheena. The trident on it. Well, we found the company. We bought a bunch of the sweatshirts. They finally were shipped out tonight, thank God. So hopefully we're going to get them in the next couple of weeks. But they're really, I mean, they're beautiful. Vlad was able to buy one, and now we've got a whole bunch more coming. They're very cool. But we're auctioning those off. We've got really cool bracelets, the Azov-style steel bracelets that the Ukrainian government made to honor the 2,000 Ukrainian troops who held off the 14,000 Russian troops in that steel plant for 2 months. Remember? Well, the Ukrainians took the last bit of steel, chopped it up, and you can see, you can barely tell on TikTok, but they put a little stamp on there of the Ukrainian trident. You guys can see it better. And they don't make these anymore. We bought a bunch of them, and we've got 3 left that we're auctioning off. And then we've got the final stamp. I don't have any more commemorative Ukrainian stamps. These stamps that are the Russian warship Go F Yourself stamps that show a soldier holding his finger up to the Russian warship. Very cool. Oh, I was going to tell you, but the reason I was mentioning this too is we've been taking the proceeds, and half the money goes to support my work because I've been doing this for free full time and I've got to pay my bills. But half of it we're channeling back into Ukraine. And in the last several days alone, we've bought walkie-talkie batteries for the troops. We just today or yesterday bought 2 more, what do you call them? The Starlink satellite receivers. They're going for like 400 euros or so each. That's the cheapest we can get them over there. But we used the auction proceeds to get 2 more Starlink, internet receivers for their satellite internet. It's really cool. For the Ukrainian troops. Anyway, we've been doing a lot of stuff. We actually channeled some of the money, and we're going to do a fundraiser on this too. Thank you, Ali. I'm setting it up for tomorrow. I'm going to launch a fundraiser tomorrow. We're raising money to help the Ukrainians. The Ukrainians have got their citizens joining together to make camouflage nets. And they're basically making, I've got a really cool, actually, I think I'll show you guys really quick. I haven't put up the fundraiser yet, but I'll put it up tomorrow. But we've got, basically, they've got people in the various towns that are in the east in Ukraine that are making camouflage nets. They're making winter camouflage nets to basically look like snow. And we are going to raise money to help them get more material. For $20, we can raise enough material for one net, but they're very large nets. It's like 6 meters by 9 meters or something. So each $20 will enable them to make one net. So anyway, do not give yet. I'm going to put up the notice tomorrow on how we're doing it, but that's the kind of stuff we've been trying to do with my show, and we've been doing with the Ukrainians, which has been really neat. And thank you, Annie, for that. The reason I was telling you is because I was telling you about my Discord auction. We've been channeling half of the monies from the Discord auction as well into doing exactly that kind of stuff. So half of the same difference, really, the proceeds and the profit. It's a long story. I'll explain to you later. It's half of the proceeds because Vlad has been donating his share. Basically, I've been giving Vlad his money back to pay him back, and he's been channeling it into helping the Ukrainians instead of paying himself back. So he's been great for this. All right, let me keep going. Germany. Oh, big news from Germany tonight. So the German defense minister, Pistorius, who's the new German defense minister, made a surprise visit to Ukraine today. And very cool, he announced, little complicated here, but let me tell you, he announced that the German government has approved re-export licenses for Denmark and Netherlands to join Germany in sending 178 Leopard 1 tanks to Ukraine. Now, the Leopard 1 tank is the earlier version of the Leopard 2. The Leopard 2 is the really cool tank from the Germans that the Ukrainians are looking forward to. Leopard 1, still a big deal. Thank you, Bonnie, for that. It's much older I think it. I'm trying to even remember if the Leopard 1 goes back to the 60s, maybe that it was created, I think. But it's the Bundeswehr. I mean, it goes back to West Germany's military back then. And the Germans have basically approved for Denmark and Sweden to either sell or give their Leopard 1 tanks to Ukraine. Now, still a big deal. 1970s. Okay, thanks, Orc Troll Hunter. Still a big deal. These are still good tanks, but nonetheless, not nonetheless, it's going to, a lot of them. Now, here's the downside. There's a little bit of a downside here. Okay, listen to this. Repairs are going to be an issue. The statement the Germans put out, how many Leopard 1A5 main battle tanks will actually be delivered to Ukraine depends on the necessary repair work. All of this came from Business Insider Germany today. Timing is going to be an issue. The German defense minister said during his visit to Kyiv that 20 to 25 tanks should be delivered by the summer. This is the Leopard 1s, okay? By the end of the year, there should be up to 80 delivered. The aim is to reach more than 100 in the course of the first or second quarter of 2024, right? So not all of these are arriving anytime soon. There's also going to provide spare parts and ammunition. Another big catch, and here's the final thing. So a lot of these tanks are in storage and need to be repaired. Listen to this. Business Insider learned from government circles that the financing for the repair of the vehicles has not yet been secured. They're hoping to figure that out in the next few weeks. So basically, the Germans have approved sending these weapons to Ukraine, but they need to be rebuilt first. So anyway, hopefully that's, I don't mean to put it out as a snag, so that's okay. Hopefully it's not a snag. But you know, water, and then I'm having an inspired thought. What bothers me with this, and not the Germans, I mean, you know, but overall, we really dilly-dallied with this whole thing. You know, we waited so long for the tanks. Finally, we agreed like 2 weeks ago to give Ukraine the tanks. And what we're finding is, surprise, it's going to take a year to get the damn tanks to Ukraine. You know, I mean, it just pisses me off because we are talking about a major Russian offensive happening possibly in the next few weeks, certainly a major one happening by April, right? And yes, I mean, Dark Chef is saying at least 30 can be there by April. You know, Ukraine will be able to get some tanks in the next few months, but a lot of these, the American tanks, forget it. The American tanks won't be getting there. You know, we'll be lucky if any American tanks get there in 6 months, let alone, you know, the end of the year. It just ticks me off because this is what happens when you take things too slowly. There's a lot of help Ukraine needed, like the tanks, that we can't just turn it on out of nowhere and have these things arrive. You know, it just, anyway, pisses me off. I mean, I'm glad we're doing it, but give me a break. You know, I just think it's BS to sit here and say, you know, we're sending 187 tanks and you should get them all by the middle of next year. Okay, should we just ship them to Moscow at that point? I mean, right? In any case, Switzerland. So Switzerland, the story's getting more and more interesting. The Swiss, there's two issues going on with Switzerland and arms. One of which is Switzerland, like every other country on the planet, pretty much reserves the right to decide what happens to weapons that it sells you. Basically, any country that sells weapons, and if you think about it, this makes sense, says, if I sell you a weapon, I'm selling it to you. I'm not selling it to anybody else. You do not have the right to sell or give that weapon to anybody else, right? In essence, it's almost as if I still retain the license to the weapon, in essence, if you think of it as software or something. So if you want to ever give your weapon to a third party, you have to ask me first. Well, countries have been asking Switzerland for a number of different weapons, and Switzerland's been saying no. Switzerland has a long record of neutrality. Now, I don't know if I put the quote down here. Did I put the quote today? No, there was a Swiss, I think, lawmaker that was saying, yes, we're neutral, but we're also part of the West. And that Switzerland is kind of finally coming to terms with that what does neutrality really mean? For example, one of the arguments was, Is Switzerland, this is from the Swiss, is Switzerland really neutral in the war on Ukraine if Switzerland tells other countries that those countries can't do with their weapons what they want? In other words, if Switzerland tells other countries, you can't give those weapons to Ukraine, that helps Russia. So how are they neutral? I would also say Switzerland has a very large arms industry. It's a little hypocritical for Switzerland to be like, oh, we're neutral. We simply arm the wars around the world, but we don't take a side. I mean, it's a little, I think it's a little scummy, basically. I mean, in any case, good news in terms of what's happening in Switzerland now. They're having a big debate in Parliament about the issue of whether they should give permission to other countries to basically give or sell the Swiss weapons to these other parties, Ukraine, basically. They're also, I mentioned this to you guys the other night, they're looking into possibly, and this was kind of an interesting idea, giving, they've got a number of Leopard, I'm forgetting which Leopards the Swiss have now, Leopard 1s or Leopards 2, I think it's Leopard 2s, I'm trying to remember now, Leopard 1s or 2s, in storage because they were going to get rid of them. And the Swiss are considering selling those Leopards to several of the NATO countries for a small nominal fee. Thank you, Bonnie, for that. For a small nominal fee. Thank you, Erica. Appreciate the gift. Keep them coming, guys. Thank you. And then, okay, I'm trying to think of how to explain this simply. All right, I'm the Czech Republic. I've got a number of Leopard tanks. I'd like to give my is it Leopard 2s? Okay, I'd like to give my Leopard 2s to Ukraine, but I can't give my Leopard 2s to Ukraine because I'm the Czech president. I've got to defend Czechia, right? I've got to defend my country. I can't give up my tanks. Switzerland jumps in and says, aha, well, we've got 100 tanks. Thank you, Jean, for the, or Jean-Marquis, merci bien, for the claw there, pour les talons, if one says that. So Switzerland's saying, well, what if we, Czechia, sell you 20 of our Leopard tanks for a very cheap price. And if you, Czechia, decide, well, now you have 20 extra tanks. So you can give your tanks to Ukraine, right? Now, the Swiss were having some issues with that because they were saying, well, in money, we'd call this fungibility. Isn't Switzerland really enabling the transfer? And I mean, if you want to get into the legality of it, no. Switzerland is simply doing what Switzerland does, selling weapons to Czechia. And if Czechia has other German tanks that it got from Germany, it could decide what it wants to do with them. So anyway, big debate going on. The poll numbers have been 55% of respondents in the most recent poll on Sunday favored allowing weapon re-exports to Ukraine. But one of the things that they were asking permission for previously was German and Danish requests for permission to re-export Swiss armored vehicles and ammunition for anti-aircraft tanks. Oh, those are the Leopard tanks, right? The anti-aircraft tanks, and the Swiss said no before. So this could be a big deal if this happens, but let's see. I've also got a Patreon set up, guys. Make sure you check it out too. Patreon's a neat way to help folks out. It's patreon.com/Aravosis. Again, you can find all my links in the profile. Thank you, Happy Bear, or Happy Beach. Happy Bear, I'm calling you. Happy Beach family. Thank you. And Nancy, thank you as well. I've got on TikTok, you can find all my links in the Linktree link in my profile. The rest of you, just go to aravosis.com. But Patreon's a neat way to basically chip in a little bit of money each month to help a creator, and it just keeps renewing each month. Thank you, Carlin, for the hat there. So my Patreon is patreon.com/Aravosis. If you can help, I'd appreciate it. Thank you, Bonnie. Oh, those fireworks are very cool, Bonnie. Thank you. I don't know if I've seen the fireworks before. Maybe we have. Those are very cool. Thank you for that. I see Jamie has a super chat question. Part of the deal for the super chat questions is I will always get to those immediately if I see them. So Jamie, let me put my glasses on and jump to your question. Thank you, Magical Photo, for the hand hearts. Jamie is asking, is there any strategic advantage if Russia takes Donbas region when it comes to troops traveling underground? Oh boy, I'm not really up on the mines. How far do the mines travel underground? So there are a ton of mines in eastern Ukraine, okay? We were talking about Donbas. So Donbas is the sort of entire region of two states in eastern Ukraine, Luhansk, Donetsk. Luhansk, the Russians already control 98% or whatever. Donetsk, the Russians control like 50%. The thinking is the Russians this spring, or maybe even in 2 weeks, will make a big push to try to get the rest of Donetsk, so they control all of Donbass, all of the 2 provinces. Okay, they've been obviously doing the big push in Bakhmut right here in the last several weeks. Bakhmut and the region in general has a number of mines for gypsum and salt, I believe, were the 2 big things that they've got. And the mines apparently are very huge and everywhere. And I was reading about the issue of, well, there you go. Eliza is saying on TikTok, it would make good for ammunition storage, also potentially hiding troops, right? I mean, the Ukrainians, remember, one of the things the Ukrainians were doing in the Azovstal steel plant in Mariupol, the place where the steel came from for the bracelet that we're auctioning off, right? The Azovstal plant is a massive complex underground, and the Ukrainians, the Russians couldn't get to them. I mean, they basically starved them out, so the Ukrainians ran out of food and water. Otherwise, there was no way the Russians were going to get them, because they were so entrenched underground and they could just keep running, place to place. Similar kind of thing with the mines in eastern Ukraine. My guess, Jamie, is this. Mines would be very helpful for defenders, okay? Well, 2 things. One, it's hard to find, if there's a massive mine complex, it's hard to find everybody, because you go down and, okay, not only is everybody hiding and they keep running away, right? But also, very, very, sorry, is the sound being bad on TikTok? Well, you know what? I can, if the sound, actually, TikTokers, let me know if the sound is being funky. If it is, I can go to my regular iPad sound if I have to. Let me know, okay? It's fine, okay. One thing that was happening with the Ukrainians, you got me thinking about this too, with Mariupol. So Mariupol, right? The Azovstal steel plant, Mariupol, all the way down here, southeastern Ukraine. The Russians now control it. Horrific what the Russians did. I mean, bombed the hell out of this poor town. Population like 450,000. Now it's probably under 100,000. Just horrible what the Russians have done here. Not only were the Ukrainian troops able to hide in the mines and the Russians just couldn't find them, but what I'd read was it was incredibly dangerous for the Russians to go down in the mines and hunt them, partially because, I mean, imagine a mine, right? Or in this case, it's underground like a mine, but a mine with so many dark tunnels and caverns and things going every which way. There are going to be snipers. There's the chance of a sniper everywhere to kill you. That's the first problem. Secondly, I know in the Azovstal basement, there was concern about the noise. And I don't remember if it was the machine guns or what it was, but the noise would be so loud that it was basically, you didn't want to use your weapons underground. Apparently it was so loud. I don't know if ricochet was a problem too, but I remember the noise. Okay, any weapon, Insomniac is saying. I just remember them saying the noise level would be so horrific underground firing this thing that it itself would be a problem too. So I would think for defenders, the mines are very interesting, because how do you get people out of them, right? Potentially the mines could be interesting if you want to, that's interesting too. Okay. The Peace on Mars is saying the sound echoes so much you can't tell where it's coming from. That's a good point. Yep. Another thing is, if the mines are so extensive, you could did I say mimes again? People are making mime jokes, like M-I-M-E on TikTok. Every time I say mine, I'm afraid I'm going to say mime. I'm just convinced I'm going to say mime. Like Marcel Marceau. Oh God, the Russian mimes. Terrifying thought. But if the mines are so extensive, you might have the ability to also pop out in different locations and attack as well. Oh, there you go. Jamie, that's funny. Jamie just said on YouTube exactly what I was thinking. They could pop up anywhere like a mole undetected. That's exactly it. Now, mind you, you'd have to know the mine network, right? So whoever's using it would have to know where things are to be able to navigate. But, I guess the question becomes, if these mines are so advantageous, will the Russians really be able to take the area or not? Or will the Ukrainians be able to mount such a defense that they can stop them? I don't know. Keep in mind, finally, what happened at Azovstal was the Russians ended up basically starving. Well, in essence, they would have starved the Azov battalion, the Ukrainians, to death. They were cut off their water and cut off their food, and they were running out of ammunition too, so that they would have eventually just died underground. So you have that possibility too. Could you at least encircle the mine network enough that you can stop them from getting resupplied, All right, thank you for that. That was interesting. And thank you, Jamie, for that too. A couple other quick little stories here. Thank you, Pam. Oh, yeah, early Valentine's gift. Thank you for that. So Ukraine released a video today that the Guardian has that appears to show the Russian Wagner mercenary troops dragging their badly wounded commander away from the battlefield and then beating him violently with shovels. We don't know. I mean, obviously, we don't have any more on it. The news has been reporting on it all day. If it's true, it would suggest perhaps there's some morale problems with that unit, which is good. Alexander Vindman, who you may all recall during the Trump impeachment hearings, he was testifying about Trump's, the first Trump impeachment hearings. He was testifying against Trump because of basically telling what happened with Trump's call to Zelensky when Trump was threatening to cut off military aid to President Zelensky in Ukraine if Zelensky didn't basically come up with evidence to try to harm Biden in the election. And Vindman is raising money, and then Trump retaliated against Vindman and his twin brother. Vindman is raising money to help send mechanics to Ukraine to help with vehicle and weapon repair at the front. Kind of cool. Very brave. Let me see. I'm going too long here. I don't want to go too much longer here. You know what? Let's do the Q&A. And when I do the summary at the end, the recap, I'll mention some of the 2 or 3 stories at the end I haven't talked about. All right. So questions. TikTok, submit the questions via the Q&A link in my profile. YouTube and the rest of you, obviously you can use the question box. Please do keep the gifts coming on TikTok and on YouTube. I appreciate it. The super chat questions and the fun gifts on TikTok, they help me pay the bills. So thank you guys. I appreciate that. Why don't I jump on TikTok first thing? Look for a Q&A question right now. Oh, thank you. I see some Shane Tuches. I see somebody actually bought the Patreon subscription while we were talking. Thank you for that. Thank you, Dawn. And that was very nice of you, Sean. Thank you for that. And who is that? Who did the roses here? Crusher, Dawn, and Victor with the gifts there, and Magical Photo. Thank you. Let me pull up here the tick. Oh, carbs. TikTok pulls up like all the other live videos when you try to join. So anyway, when Putin loses Crimea, Zelensky will tell him Crimea River. Okay, Dad. Crimea River. Okay. And that was your dad Ukraine joke for the night. Thank you, Magical Photo. Did you see the Reuters article today that Russia is investigating Ukraine using chemical weapons? No, but I'm wondering if this is what I saw was, I don't know if this is the same. Thank you, Cammie. Oh, that's very, I don't think I've seen that one before either. Thank you for the unicorn fantasy. Wow, thank you for that. I don't know if this is the same one. Russia was claiming yesterday that Ukraine had plans to attack a hospital in eastern Ukraine or something like that, right? And so I don't know if this is the same thing. Now, basically, when Russia lies a lot. I mean, that's a mainstay of their foreign policy, is disinformation. It always has been, actually to their own people as well. It's the way sort of the dictatorship ran, and it's the way the dictatorship's running again, and it's the way the war is running in their foreign policy. They lie a lot. Was it Pegasus? I was thinking it was a unicorn. Wasn't there on there? No, it said unicorn fantasy. It's a unicorn. Pegasus doesn't have a unicorn. Pegasus is winged. It's a winged okay. It's a winged unicorn. Fair enough. If Pegasus and the unicorn had a baby. In any case, we were saying with you got me going on the Pegasus thing here. What were we saying here? You guys are making me forget now what we were talking about. I don't mind though, because it's the gift, so I appreciate the gifts going. Sorry. We got me on a tangent talking about that, and I'm forgetting. And about the Pegacorn, and now I'm forgetting the topic we were talking about. I do appreciate the gifts, though, so keep those coming. Thanks, guys. Oh, it was the Reuters article. I think with that kind of stuff, Russia Russia doesn't just lie. Yeah, thank you. The Russian lying, but they're also telegraphing what they're going to do. They it could be a false flag. Basically, a false flag operation is one where you you actually commit the crime or something and you accuse the other guy of doing it. So in this case, oh my God, Ukraine did a chemical attack against a hospital. What horrible people. We must bomb the hell out of them. Right. And you're doing it because you're trying to make Ukraine look bad. Putin, it is believed, did one of these in the early part of every time I come on with you guys, I forget the year. One of these, I'm going to write this down and put it on my computer, either 1999 or 2003. And I always forget the year. Thank you, Christy, for the fireworks. But it is believed that Putin blew up an apartment complex in Moscow in order to make it seem like Chechen rebels did it. And basically, 1991? No, it was not 1991. It would have been 1999. Yeah, it was the end of the decade or early 2000s. Yeah, 1999. And it is believed that Putin blew up. Thank you, by the way, for the rose there, Cheryl. It's believed that Putin blew up an entire apartment complex in Moscow, and that's how he got into power. Because it was this whole, look at the evil terrorists. You need a strong man like me to stop them. Voila. So if that's the kind of man Putin is, you've got to be very careful when the Russians say, "Oh, it looks like the Ukrainians are going to blow up a hospital." So the same thing here. If the Russians are accusing the Ukrainians of possibly using chemical weapons, it means the Russians might be planning on using chemical weapons. Yeah, there's no way the Ukrainians are, because the Ukrainians aren't going to risk. First of all, they don't have them, but also they're not going to risk aid from the West. The Russians, oh God, they're so bad at this. Anyway. What else we got here? So we got more TikTok questions, but I want to make sure I get some of your guys too. Since Wagner Group is continually throwing themselves at Ukrainian lines, do you think this is also an attempt by Putin to keep Wagner weakened from attempting to take power? Well, the question, Alec, is it depends who's actually in charge of them, right? I mean, we don't know. I don't know whether Putin truly has the say of what's happening. I mean, in the end, he has the say because he's the top guy. But whether it's Putin who's doing it or whether it's Prigozhin who's the oligarch, the billionaire who actually founded the group and runs it, whether Prigozhin's the one who's saying, send in the prisoners, just kill them, make them all run in there as cannon fodder. I don't know which. I will say clearly in the last couple of weeks, the sort of defense experts believe that Prigozhin has sort of fallen out of favor, that he went just a little too far in terms of trying to take on the Ministry of Defense in Russia. Long story, but if you've been following my show, you'll know this. But basically, you've got this very powerful mercenary group. So the soldiers for hire, this private army inside Russia, and it's run by an oligarch who's a private billionaire. But because it's Russian, Putin still has a hand in it somehow, right? Because it's Russia, but they're a private army. They, for example, work for the government in Mali, where they're doing work to help fight the Al-Qaeda in Africa fighters, and I guess ISIS fighters in Mali. Really, Mali is a very sad story across the board. And the sorry, I was saying with the I'm having little brain farts tonight. Sorry, I think I'm tired tonight too. The Wagner Group, the fighters. Yeah. So you've had this private military. Thank you, AJ, for the rose. This private military versus the Russian military, right? The Ministry of Defense, regular Russian troops. You've had both of them fighting in Ukraine, both of them trying to take credit from each other, right? So Wagner, the private mercenaries, have been doing, we think, most of the fighting in Bakhmut in the east. But recently, the Ministry of Defense claimed they're the ones that are doing the fighting, and they didn't give the Wagner Group any credit. But then the Wagner people turned around and said, no, it was our people, didn't give the military any credit. Recently, it looks like the military has now gotten very involved in what's going on in Bakhmut. Clearly, the two sides don't get along. There's been a lot of public recriminations. Thank you, Benji, for the hat. Going so far as Prigozhin has even been doing things, and I mentioned this to you guys in the last couple of months, Prigozhin's been doing things that even the billionaire in charge of the Wagner Group, even doing things that look like he's taking on Putin. It's really weird. And that almost critical of Putin. And I've been saying that it almost makes me feel, as a political guy looking at this, like Prigozhin is kind of challenging Putin, for whether he's setting himself up to be the next Russian dictator after Putin. So the thinking is that Prigozhin finally overstepped a little, and Putin is kind of trying to knock him in place. So one of the things Putin did, by the way, and this was also considered anti-Prigozhin, when Putin got rid of Surovkin, who was the general in charge of the war most recently. Remember how Putin keeps changing the guy in charge of the war? Recently with Surovkin, he got demoted. And now the guy in charge of the war is the top general in the military, Gerasimov. He basically is the Russian equivalent of the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff in the U.S. Thank you, Netlin, for the gift. So he's been put in place. And the thinking is that Gerasimov is more responsible to Putin. He's one of Putin's guys, whereas Surovkin was one of Prigozhin, was one of the mercenary guys. One of their guys. So all this is what I was telling you, it's like reading the tea leaves, all the stuff going on in Russia. It's very crazy behind the, lots of weird stuff. Anyway, thank you, Stephen, for the origami. Oof. Yeah, Prigozhin also had some whole crazy, exactly, Mike, had some thing yesterday where he threatened Putin to a dogfight in airplanes yesterday. And he's weird. I mean, he's weird. Let me see here. Oh, that's interesting. Otanbot from Norway is saying, how might a Russian defeat in Ukraine affect the political situation in Belarus and its relations with European countries? Well, I mean, who knows? It's because the problem is, okay, Belarus is up here, okay? Russia, all the way, Ukraine, Russia, all the way over here, Poland, other NATO countries down here, Poland, Belarus, big dictatorship run by a big, nasty dictator named Lukashenko. Nasty guy, big friend of Putin. Russia loses the war. Putin potentially loses his job. What does that mean for Lukashenko? Is Lukashenko's position more threatened if Russia loses? Does the military look at Lukashenko and say, you tied yourself to this war? So far, Belarus isn't fighting in the war, but Belarus is letting Russia use Belarus to fight the war, right? They're housing troops there. They're launching attacks from there. So the question becomes and I just don't know, if Russia loses, does it destabilize Russia? Thank you, Marcy, for the glasses. Does Putin lose his job? If Putin loses his job, does Lukashenko lose his job? Does Lukashenko, even for whatever reason, start to say, Russia is a failed state, or at least a failed country, in the sense that, sorry, didn't mean to highlight the question there. Sorry about that. Oops. Oh, and I can see a Daniel O'Neill question, I'm going to guess there. Oh, hello. Oh, Michael. Wow. Thank you for that, Michael Taylor. Wow, that was incredibly generous of you. And no question. Well, thank you for that. Feel free to ask a question, but that was incredibly nice of you. Thank you for that. Oh, I'm sorry. Somebody gave a very generous super sticker there. So yeah, we were saying in terms of Belarus, one thing that's interesting is if Russia loses the war, and already Russia's kind of finding itself in this situation, Russia is not as important as they were a year ago. The Russian military clearly isn't as good as all of us thought it was. Additionally, the Russian military isn't as good as it was anyway, because they've been fighting a war for a year. They're tired. They've lost a lot of men. They've lost a lot of weapons. So if Russia was here last year, they're maybe here this year because they've been fighting and they're tired and they've lost a lot of weapons. Secondly, we thought Russia was here last year, but Russia was actually at this level last year. Their military wasn't as good as we thought it was. So not only is Russia worse off because they're tired and use their weapons, but Russia's worse off in perception because we now realize Russia isn't nearly as strong a military power as we all thought it was. All of that makes countries less likely to fear Russia It also makes countries less likely to want to cozy up to Russia because you kind of want to. I mean, think of Lindsey Graham, right? Lindsey Graham wanted to cozy up to the big fish. The big fish was John McCain, and then the big fish was Donald Trump. I'm sure Lindsey Graham any day now will be cozying up to Ron DeSantis probably, but he always wants the big man, the big boy to protect him. And I think potentially Belarus could go the same way, but because it's run by a brutal dictator, there's so many questions in the air with that. You know what I mean? It's not like it's just simply a democracy that can say, well, we've been saddling up to this country and they suck and they're powerless. We're going over to the other guy. Thank you, Nurse Boyer, for that. Beep, 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 beep. All right, sorry, what was that? Oh, TikTok, yes, more TikTok questions. Oh, actually, you know what? And we'll go to the Discord tonight because I was not able to go to the Discord last night. So we will go to my Discord and hang out tonight and just chat. Usually it's a much more relaxed crowd over at the Discord, by the way. Discord.aravosis.com. And I mean, on TikTok, you can find it via the link in my profile. The rest of you can just go to aravosis.com or discord.aravosis.com. Same difference. Let's see here. I mean, who has the top position in NATO and are they pro-Ukraine? I mean, the answer to the second question is yes. The answer to the first question is it depends. I mean, who has the top position in NATO? NATO is a treaty organization of 30 countries who are all allies. So in principle, nobody has the top position. There is a supreme allied commander wait a minute, actually. Hang on. Now I'm already getting confused with all of this. I mean, you've got the Secretary General of NATO, who is Stoltenberg, who is super, super pro. Everyone's pro Ukraine. That's not even an issue. Jens. I was looking up his first name. Oh, former Prime Minister of Norway. I knew he was something like that. But the thing is, it's not. There's no country who's the top. Really. I mean, everyone is up. Well, UK is next up for the job. Somebody was saying that. I was going to say, I told people, I thought I had heard that a woman was up for the job, but now there was some talk about renewing Stoltenberg. I will say this, Stoltenberg, the Secretary General of NATO, has been, I would say, more pro-NATO than even Biden in a way. I've had the sense from him that he has been pushing the Biden administration and all the NATO countries to be even like a little more supportive of Ukraine in terms of weapons and everything else. That's been my sense, I would say. But no, my suspicion is whoever we get next, we would make sure that it's somebody super pro Ukraine, I don't think that's a problem. It's not a problem, but I can't imagine that would be an issue. If things go badly, what's more likely? This is like one of those, would you rather sleep with someone or eat a pile of something? Thank you, Bonnie, for the gift there. Who is it? L for the heart. If things go badly, what's more likely? 1, Russia wins the war and takes Ukraine, or 2, other nations join the war and push them back. More likely is Russia wins the war and takes Ukraine because we do not want a world war with Russia. Other countries are not going to join the war and push Russia back. What you might see other countries do, however, is give Ukraine the weapons they need to push Russia back. That's a different story, right? So that we give Ukraine the planes it needs. We give Ukraine the long-range missiles that we're not giving it that go 200 miles or 300 kilometers. That's a possibility, right? So I think that's an easy one in that case, that basically if things don't go well, you're going to see potentially NATO countries. You're going to see two things. I talked about this the other night. You're going to see some NATO countries that are saying we've got to give even more weapons to Ukraine and better weapons. You're going to see other countries say, okay, we better reach some deal with Russia because this isn't ending well. But if things aren't going well, what's the incentive for Russia to negotiate anyway, right? If Russia's winning, Russia has no need to negotiate. Not no need. I mean, they're still spending a lot of money and there's a lot of sanctions and everything else. But, Q&A. That's possible. Wah is asking, do you think Ukraine gets military supplies delivered before the West says they will be sent? Possibly. I've wondered, one of the questions we've always had is, why does the West keep talking publicly about what it's sending Ukraine and what it's not sending and when it's coming? And it seems crazy. The only reason I could see publicly saying when the tanks are arriving is because it's misinformation, because we're trying to trick the Russians into thinking the tanks won't be there, right? I mean, otherwise, why would we ever say publicly, "Oh, we're sending," like the Germans today, "We're sending 178 tanks, but most of them won't arrive for until next year"? Why would we say that? Let the Russians fear that there's more tanks coming. So my hope is that a lot of this stuff is arriving more quickly. My hope. One of the other quick little advantages, I was reading about this again today. I did mention it a few days ago, but by Ukraine knowing the weapons are coming, even if they're not there yet, it means, for example, the battle in the spring, the big counteroffensive that we're expecting from Russia. Even if Ukraine won't have a lot of the tanks yet at that point, Ukraine knows more tanks are coming and they know when the tanks are coming, because certainly we'll tell Ukraine, oh yeah, the Danish shipment should come in June. Don't tell anybody. The Norwegian shipment should come in May, whatever. So the Ukrainians can budget that into their battle plans, right? It's one thing if you're fighting a battle and thinking, I've got 100 tanks or whatever. I've got let's just say 100. I've got 100 tanks and that's it, or 500 tanks and that's it. I'd better be careful how I use them because that's all we've got for the war. Than to say, oh, we've got a whole 500 other tanks coming in 6 months to 9 months. So actually we can afford to lose some of the tanks because we've got tanks making up them. So it actually will empower Ukraine to do more, even in these battles in the next few months, because they've got tanks to spare now that they don't have to reserve them for future battles. So that's a good thing. I don't know. Rachel's asking, this may be my last question, and then we'll do a synopsis and then go over to the Discord. Rachel's asking, good question. Do you think Ukraine would go for a major offensive before Russia tries theirs to throw Russia off and hamper Russian preparations? One of the concerns that, we keep reading this. Again, this could be disinformation too. NATO people keep saying one of their concerns is, for example, actually, I'll tell you right now, there's a real good Twitter thread by Michael Kaufman last night. I think it was last night, who defense analyst, very well respected, quoted a lot in the big papers and everywhere. And he was talking about how he believes that even though Russia keeps getting more and more men, and it looks like Russia may have, since September, October, Russia may have doubled the number of men they've got in Ukraine. It hasn't really made that much of a difference. It really hasn't helped Russia that much because, they're not well trained, they're not well equipped, and the Ukrainians are a very good fighting force. So what Kaufman is saying is he thinks the Ukrainians should dig in and fight a defensive battle, let the Russians throw everything they've got at them, and basically just sit back, dig in, and pick the Russians off, and basically take this whole new big Russia wave and decimate it. And then if you want to fight later, fight later. The concern that some of the defense experts have is and mind you, Ukraine might be right though. They're worried that Ukraine is looking at this and thinking, yeah, but we only have so long to fight this, because how long is NATO going to really be on board, right? Do we really have a couple years to fight this? Or do we have to have some big wins now, not just because we need the wins, but also will NATO support get softer if it looks like we're having a stalemate with Russia? If it looks like, yeah, Russia attacked and we beat them, but we didn't get any of our land back, so we're still where we were 6 months ago, this kind of thing, right? So at least Kaufman and some of the others, I think, were almost worried that Ukraine might try to launch its counteroffensive, maybe even before the big, now whether it's before this big one in 2 weeks, I don't know, but before the big Russian one that could be April or something like that, Sarah, thank you, Sarah, for that. Why does it seem Russia doesn't have great weapons, or why are they not using them? Really bad, well, bad training, like poorly trained troops. Some of the weapons have had maintenance problems. tanks and things like that. I mean, tanks, the wheels on the weapons were just maintained horribly. Some of it is the Russians not being trained well in terms of how to basically use the weapons well in concert with everybody else. So in other words, when you've got a weapon, typically, and again, the defense guys can, I mean, I'm a foreign policy guy, but the defense guys can tell you more. You say, okay, we've got a tank, but we don't just throw 10 tanks in a row. We've got, thank you, biofuel guy. We've got the tanks. We've got the armored personnel carriers with the tanks. We've got artillery fighting at the same time. We've got armed forces on the ground. We've got an advanced team of saboteurs. We've got drones. We've got airplanes, right? It's this whole combined arms. Like, how does this all work together? The Russians aren't very good at it. Logistics, horrible the Russians are. Oh, that was a Yoda. Logistic, horrible the Russians are. The Russians are horrible at logistics as well. So that a lot of the weapons, they couldn't use them because they ran out of fuel. The soldiers ran out of food and water, and they broke down also because of the tires and things. So remember that big 40-mile long convoy. Somebody else was saying on TikTok that was a really good point too. The money was stolen. Yeah, that was an excellent point. Oh, thank you for the flowers there, Faded. A lot of the defense money was stolen, so that the money didn't even go. So Russia thought it was building up its forces for the last 20 years, and it wasn't, not nearly as much as it thought it was. There was one other thing. I mean, there's a lot. There was one other thing in that regard too. The money was stolen, the forces. Oh, shoot. There was one. I can't remember now. There was one. I mean, there's a lot more, but there was one other thing that also said why they didn't do as well as they thought they would do. Oh, shoot. Money stolen. I can't think now. Anyway, I mean, but yeah, a lot of it was stolen as well. The government officials, it would, the defense budget. I mean, the defense budget starts at the top. It goes down. Each different bureau, each office gets, I mean, literally, right? You're also talking, this is Russia. So this isn't exactly the Pentagon. A lot of these people are probably getting paid in cash, I would think. Like, a lot of this is probably money going around. Well, if there's money going around, right? You go to a defense contractor and he's building your tank. Well, right? He takes some of the money, for himself, and the military guy who's buying the tank takes some of the money for himself, right? So all this kind of crazy stuff, All right, let me do a quick recap, guys, and then we're going to go over to the Discord and hang out for a little bit, all right? And then we'll be back tomorrow night. Remember, 6 p.m. Eastern, Monday to Friday. All righty. Tonight is the State of the Union, which is the president's address to the nation, talking about how the nation is doing and his plans for the year. He's expected to make a big pitch for Ukraine. UK British Ministry of Defense says it is unlikely Russia can make any significant gains in the coming weeks. Germany has approved re-export licenses for Denmark and the Netherlands and Germany itself to send 178 Leopard 1 tanks to Ukraine, but those tanks are going to be arriving over the next year. So, they're all not arriving at once. Prison fighters are becoming scarce. It looks like fewer and fewer prisoners. Thank you, Bonnie, for the star. Fewer and fewer Russian prisoners are willing to sign up for the war because they now realize they're getting killed. And the Russians don't quite care if they're getting killed. The Swiss are considering more and more, and it may change soon, we hope, basically not dropping their neutrality, but dropping it insofar as concerns Ukraine, so that they would allow third-party countries to basically provide Swiss weapons to Ukraine, which would be a really big deal. Ukraine released video apparently showing a Russian Wagner mercenary troops dragging the badly wounded body of a commander and beating him with a shovel, one of their own commanders. This is the Russians beating Russians. Alexander Vindman is raising money to help send mechanics to Ukraine to help with vehicle and weapons repair, Western mechanics. In the occupied areas of Luhansk, which is eastern Ukraine, Russian forces are reportedly forcing Ukrainian teachers to obtain Russian passports. Patriarch Kirill, this is the Russian patriarch. The Russian patriarch, who recently it was reported in either the Swiss or the German press that newly declassified documents claim that he was a former spy for the Soviet Union. He's a lovely man. Patriarch Kirill banned a Moscow cleric from services after the cleric said the word peace instead of victory while reciting the prayer Holy Rus. His own parishioners reportedly denounced him. This is from Medusa. And the last story, which I thought I hadn't mentioned it during the show because we didn't have time, but it's a very interesting story in terms of what it says of the cultural change going on in Ukraine and Russia. According to the Washington Post, Ukraine's main Catholic church is set to begin following a new calendar, breaking another link to Russia. Under the change, the church would celebrate Christmas on December 25th rather than January 7th, which is the day the Russian branch of the Orthodox Church celebrates Christmas. The calendar switch was, quote, influenced by the social change that took place in the last 6 months, which increased support among Ukrainians for the move. So in other words, you're now seeing yet another major faith in Ukraine that is switching away from the Russian sort of cultural baggage and moving towards the Western, sort of the Western cultural, which is really fascinating. So anyway, all right, guys, I'm going to say sayonara. I'll go to the Discord for a little bit. I made some IKEA meatballs tonight, so I can munch on those a little bit while we're talking, which will hold me over. Discord.aravosis.com, and otherwise join me tomorrow night here again. Thanks for joining us, guys. Thank you, moderators, for all the work you guys have been doing. All the gifts. Thank you again, guys. I appreciate all of your support. If you want to help out otherwise, go to my TikTok profile. All my links are there. Same thing for you guys, aravosis.com. My store as well. We've got a really cool store with Ukrainian themed t-shirts and stuff. So check those out. And yeah, go to the Discord. We'll hang out a little bit. Once you get to the Discord, if you're new, you've got to click the read me, click the I accept the terms, blah, blah, blah. And then finally in the left, all the way down, you'll see John's after party. So we'll be there. All right, guys. All right. Join me in the Discord. Otherwise, I'll see you guys tomorrow night, 6 p.m. Eastern time, US. Set your alarms Monday to Friday. All right, guys. Bye-bye. Yep.